implement as we try to help others and encourage others. You know, when we think usually of the boss, we usually don't think of it as in a positive light. For example, if you're sitting there and somebody says to you, the boss is about to walk by, what do? You probably sit up straighter, right? Why do we do that? Well, we're supposed to be doing something, right? We don't look like we're slouching. We're trying to send a message, right? Because we don't want the boss to get on to us. And many times that's what we think of as when you think of a boss, when we think of leadership. We think of somebody whose job it is to get on us, right? To make us straighten up, to fix us when we're doing something wrong. That shouldn't be the only way we think about leadership. Charles Schwab once said, "I've yet to find a man, however great or exalted his station, who will not do better work and put forth a greater effort under a spirit of approval than they ever would under a spirit of criticism." You see, true leadership isn't just about finding fault. It's easy to do that. You know, if you go to tear down a building, you don't need much know-how to do it. But if you go to build one, it's going to take some know-how. Tearing something down is easy. Finding fault is easy. Seeing problems is easy. But what's harder is to lift up, to build up, to encourage, to edify. It's easy to tear down. It's harder to lift up. But neither is growing up without somebody believing in you. Neither it is continuing on without somebody supporting you. In our scripture reading this morning in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11, we're commanded to encourage one another, to build one another up. What are we to be doing? We're to be building and lifting others up. See, that's what leaders do. That's what we see mentioned in the scriptures over and over. That leaders build up, leaders lift up. Romans chapter 14, verse 19. So we pursue the things which make for peace and the building up of one another. Leaders lift up. And we need to be kind of people that lift others up, that build others up, that encourage one another, because that's what we need. Because too many people face a life of endless criticism and lots of things that are wrong. So we need those who are willing to lift others up. But the question then becomes, how exactly do we do that? We know we should do it, so how do we do it? So let's go back to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11 tells us that we are to build up and encourage one another. And the next several verses give us practical examples of how to do that. So if you would, open your Bibles up to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 in verses 12 through 22. And let's read through it to see if we can find some ways that we can learn how to lift one another up. In verse 12, he says this, "But we request of you, brethren, that you appreciate those who diligently labor among you and have charge over you in the Lord and give you instruction, that you esteem them very highly in the love for one another because of their work. Live in peace with one another." Now, when we read this verse, it tells us to appreciate, to esteem, and it gears it to those who we would think of as are in leadership positions, right? Those who are laboring among you, those who have charge over you. But what are we supposed to be doing to those people? Appreciating them, lifting them up. The word here that's used is translated elsewhere as to recognize, like to notice something, to see it. You see, what it's saying here is we need to take notice of what people do for us. To take notice and to encourage them, to appreciate that. Too many times we look at other people and we just get an idea of what we expect them to be doing, right? They're in some position, they're a teacher, they're supposed to be teaching, right? They're in a form of leadership, they're supposed to be leading. And when they don't do it, we get very upset. Oh, why aren't they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Maybe because we're not appreciating them. Maybe because we're not esteeming them very highly. In 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verses 17 through 18, Paul writes there, I rejoice at the coming of Stephanas and Fortunus and Achaeus, because they have supplied what was lacking on your part. For they have refreshed my spirit and yours. Therefore acknowledge such men. It's the same word. Acknowledge such men. Appreciate, esteem them. He says these guys came and they were able to give what you couldn't give. They were able to lift up and build up what others couldn't do. What should we do to men like that? We should appreciate them. But unfortunately, that's not usually how we react to leadership. That's not how we act to sometimes those who are teachers, those who are workers. We just expect them to do. And when we don't, we might complain. But do we ever appreciate? If we want to lift people up, we have to appreciate. I remember years ago, I had an acquaintance of mine who was in ministry, and he had gone through a terrible tragedy, lost a family member. It was unexpected. It was one of those, that happens on Monday, and he's doing the funeral by Saturday, and it was one of those weeks where, there's just tears you down. And he said, I remember after I got done with that funeral, he said, at the end of the service, he said, one of the leaders of his congregation came to him. He said, well, you're going to be preaching Sunday, right? And he said, I never felt more like a cog in my life. He said, I'd gone through this terrible week, and the only thing he could think about is, well, you're going to be there tomorrow, right? That's not appreciation, is it? That's not concern about others, is it? That's exactly what we shouldn't be doing. We should look to our leaders. We should look to those who put the effort in, and we should appreciate them. How do you build people up? When they do something and they continue to do something, we should appreciate them. We should esteem them. We should acknowledge them. Let's go back to 1 Thessalonians and continue in verse 14. He says, we urge you, brethren, admonish the unruly, encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with everyone. See to it that no one repays one another for evil, but always seek after that which is good for one another and for all people. What's he telling us here? Lifting up people isn't always telling people what they want to hear or what we want them to hear. But it's telling them what they need to hear. Right? What does he say here? There's different groups and they need different things. The unruly need to be admonished. The faint-hearted encouraged. The weak strengthened, helped. Patience with everyone. Not seeking evil for evil, not giving back to them what they gave to you, but looking what is good for all people. For one another. The old vice presidential candidate, Admiral Stockwell, said it this way: leadership must be based on goodwill. Goodwill does not mean posturing, and least of all, pandering to the mob. It means being obvious and wholeheartedly committed to helping followers. It means when there is a need that someone has, we look to how we can fulfill it. We give what is needed. In Romans chapter 12 and verses 16 and 7, it says, Do be of the same mind towards one another. Do not be haughty in mind, but associate with the lowly. Do not be wise in your own estimation. Never pay back evil for evil to everyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Don't look and say, what do I need this person to do? What I want them to do? What I think they need? Look at what they need. Don't pay back. Give what's needed. Notice in both passages we've seen the idea of living at peace. People need to feel special. That's why we need to compliment them. People desire a better tomorrow. That's why we need to give them hope. People need direction to navigate when they get emotionally when people need direction, that's why we need to help navigate for them. People get emotionally low, that's why we need to encourage them. People want success. That's why we need to help them find something better to help them win. You see, that's what good leaders do. That's what we need to do for others. We need to give what is needed. To look and say, what is in this situation is needed and what can I do to fill that role? Back to 1 Thessalonians, verse 16. Rejoice always. Pray without ceasing. In everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Do not quench the Spirit. Do not despise prophetic utterances. Notice in this passage he gives us several different things to do, but all of them come to this idea of what we do to what is needed. We see those needs and we respond accordingly. I remember years ago I knew a fella that he could always find the cloud in every silver lining, you know. No matter what we had and what we did, he could always find what was going wrong about it, what could fall apart about it. And sometimes that can be helpful if you're trying to see all the problems, but his was, even afterwards, even after you'd already made the decision, he was going to find something wrong with it. I guess that was his only talent and he was using it, but maybe that's a talent you want to bury in the ground, right? Because it was difficult with somebody like that because he just killed anything you had going. Just that negative cloud, just that no of everything. But that's exactly the opposite of what we see in this passage. Rejoice always. Encourage, pray. Give thanks. Don't quench the Spirit. What's he talking about there? If we always expect the worst, we'll never be disappointed. But everybody else will be. Everybody else will be disappointed because we're just making everything bad. We need to make sure that we are responding accordingly. You know why people like dogs? Because when you come into your house, what does your dog do? He's glad to see you. And if you're excited about something, he's excited about it. He has no idea what you're excited about, but he's excited there with you, right? That's why people like dogs. Maybe we should learn something from the dog. That we should be excited for people when they're excited. We should be uplifting. We should not seek to put people's interests down. But how many times do we have that wrong response? We see someone who's willing to serve, and the first thing we do is critique how they did it. Don't quench the Spirit. Don't despise what people are doing. Rejoice. Pray for them. Lift them up. Philippians 4:4-5 says, Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentle spirit be known to all men. The Lord is near. Let your gentle spirit be known comes with rejoicing. What does that mean? Let people know that you care. Sometimes giving people what they need doesn't always mean you give them something that they always like, right? It's like taking medicine. I know my dad will do that every time he pulls out all the pills he's got to take. He gets there and goes, man, I got to take all these pills. I hate taking all these pills. And I always remind him, I said, well, you can quit taking them and see what happens. It's not going to be good for you. I think we need to make sure we get that right mindset sometimes of difficulties, of things, because they can help us to find something better. And that's really what we continue in 1 Thessalonians in verse 21. But examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. Abstain from every form of evil. When you find something good, you hold on to it. You look at everything. You examine it. You think about it. You hold on to what's good and you get rid of what's not. How many of you have a cordless drill at your house? Those are handy, right? You need to put up a shelf, you need to do something with them, you just grab that drill, plug it in and go, right? No more finding an extension cord for it. No matter having to turn the screw 100 times. A cordless drill is a great thing to have, right? How many of you have a smoke detector in your house? Probably should, right? Fire starts in the middle of the night, you want to know about it, and there's a device that can sit there and always be on, but when the fire starts or you burn the bacon, well, it'll tell you about it, right? How about those of you that have kids and you have baby formula? Isn't it great to sit there and know that, if you're out and about or their grandma's keeping or something, you can send some formula over there and those kids they have something that will meet their nutritional needs. It's portable and easy to carry. How about glasses that you have that don't scratch anymore? You remember when I was little, my mom would always get on me about laying my glasses. You scratch your glasses. Well, now they got a coating they put on them, keeps them from scratching. Those are all pretty neat things, right? About the inserts in your shoes. You ever notice how shoes are just more comfortable? They got that nice padded sole in them, just bounce around. Why am I telling you about all these great products? Do you know where all those great products came from? They all came from NASA in one way or the other. They were all developed to solve a problem that we had when we were going to space. They couldn't they needed a drill to moon space rock, so they had to come up with the cordless drill. The coatings that they came up with their glasses were coatings that were used on telescopes. The baby formula was they were trying to make sure astronauts in space had the nutrients they needed, and they came up with baby formula. All those things came about because of a problem that a solution was found, and it made something else greater. Oftentimes we think about problems, and our initial thing is we won't do that. There might be a problem. But sometimes problems can help us to grow and become something more. If we don't do anything, we won't have any problems, but we won't get any solutions, and those solutions might be something that help us far more than we ever realized. That's why complacency leads to failure. Lots of churches die because they never grow. Lots of people die in the faith because they never grow. They just want to be where they're at. But that's not what this passage is telling us, right? To examine everything carefully, hold fast to what is good, get rid of what isn't good. In Galatians chapter 6, verses 3 through 4, it says, if anyone thinks he is something, he is nothing. He deceives himself. But each one must examine his own work, that he'll have reason for boasting in regard to himself and not regard to one another. It's what we talked about last week when we talked about that higher standard of Christ, and not just satisfied with what we are, but living up to the higher standard that Christ puts before us. And sometimes that can be difficult, because sometimes we don't like people that come in and tell us we could do something more or something better. I recently heard a story about a Russian scientist by the name of Peter Pachensky. He was probably one of the greatest Soviet engineers that ever lived. And when we think about the Soviet Union, and we think about the space race, and we think about the space race, and we think about the technology race of weapons and all these things, and you would think, man, that would be somebody you would want to have if you're trying to compete with another super nation. But you know what they did to Peter Pachensky? They sent him away to Siberia, and they eventually killed him because he refused to tell them that their projects were good when they weren't. See, Stalin wanted to build the biggest dam that ever was, because they thought if it was the biggest, it was the best. But he said, if we build this dam, it's going to cause more problems. The engineering's not right. When they wanted to mine and build the biggest steel mine that ever was, he said, the place that you're building won't produce enough ore. It won't work. It won't be safe. But they didn't want to hear someone tell them, no, you couldn't do that. So they did it anyhow, and thousands, millions of workers died, and it never produced. You see, they refused to listen to this man, even though he was trying to lift them up. See, lifting up is not being stuck in our ways, but looking for the better way, the best way. See, that's what he's talking about here when he tells us to examine things carefully. To make sure that we are helping. We're not just instantly saying, well, it might be a problem, so we don't do it. It might be difficult, we don't want to do it. But looking for what is best. What can build us up? What can make us greater than we were before? Because that's what leaders do. They look for that better way. They get rid of what's not working. They make sure that we don't stray into something wrong. That's part of lifting people up. Is helping them find something better. Doing the things that will help someone be better. Encouraging. Giving them what's needed. Appreciating those what we're doing. You see, when we do that, we aren't just helping them, but we're helping ourselves. July of 1999, a woman by the name of Penny Brown from Williamsville, New York, was at a ball game. Her husband was one of the little league coaches, and his kids were getting ready. They were swinging a bat, as they often do, and as often as little kids do, they're not always paying attention to who's around them. One of the kids swung a bat and hit one of the other kids in the middle of the chest, doing so stopping his heart. He falls over on the ground. No one knows what to do. Penny comes from the stands. She gets to the boy. She realizes what's happening. She begins to administer CPR. After a few hard hits to the chest, they're able to get his heart going. Then eventually the paramedics get there. They're able to check him out, take him to the hospital. It turns out he's okay. But if she hadn't have acted when she acted, the boy would have died right there. A few years down the line, Penny Brown is in a restaurant. She's having dinner, and all of a sudden something gets caught in her throat. She's choking. One of the waitresses pulls her aside and starts to perform the Heimlich maneuver, but she's not strong enough. She doesn't really know how to do it. She's not able to get it dislodged. They don't know what to do. From the back comes a man who happened to be a part-time paramedic. He was going to school to learn medicine. He was working as a dishwasher at the restaurant, and his other time he worked as a paramedic. He's able to come up, grab her from behind, and use the Heimlich maneuver to clear the obstruction and save her life. Do you know who that man was? It was that same boy that she had saved in the dugout. What you do will come back to you. If we don't lift up others, then when our time comes, when we're down, when we need encouragement, when we need a little leadership to help us do the right thing, we won't find it because we didn't invest in others when we had the chance. When we read earlier about Galatians, in Galatians chapter 6, but not thinking too highly of ourselves, but to examine our own thing, are we doing what we need to do? It starts that passage in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2 by telling us to bear one another's burdens, therefore fulfill the law of Christ. To bear one another's burdens. I don't know of any person that doesn't need to be lifted up. I don't know of any person who doesn't need to be appreciated. I don't know of any person that doesn't need someone to look and say, what can I do to help them? What do they need? And then are being willing to do that, because everybody at some point in time needs someone to lift them up. Even if they are the leader at the top, they need somebody to encourage them, to appreciate them. Even there, if the lowliest person on the rung, they need someone to help them find a better way. We all need it. So we all need to be doing it. Because that's what Christ did for us. He lifted us up. When we were down, when we were lowly, He brought us to something greater. He gave us a better way. He kept us from the thing that was destroying us and made us into something more. Today, do you need to listen to the one who's trying to lift you up, who's trying to make you something better? If you believe in Jesus Christ, He can lift you up. If you listen to what He tells you to do, you can find a better way. He can help you get out of the sin that's destroying you. He can lead you to heaven. He can save you from your sins by washing them away in baptism. Maybe today you haven't been following the way that you need to follow and you need to turn back to the Lord. Maybe it's time to recommit to Him. Maybe it's time to follow Him completely. If you need to respond to the invitation today, we encourage you to do so while we stand and sing.